I guess that will take us straight on to our last film of the evening with The Irishman. Craig, that's you doing that one, isn't it?
No, it was Scorsese, but I'm happy to talk about it.
Oh, got to get credit for something, yeah.
After many years in conceptual gestation and production limbo, we are finally privy to Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, his oft-mooted adaptation of I Heard You Paint Houses, a biography of mafia hitman Frank Sheeran and his alleged involvement in the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Starring Robert De Niro as Sheeran, Al Pacino as Hoffa, an unretired Joe Pesci as mob boss Russ Buffalino, and clocking in at 3.5 hours... Take that, Le Mans 66. The Irishman might be Scorsese's most ambitious film to date, though you might not think it to look at its surface. By now, you, like me, may be utterly bored by the attention and debate so far expended upon the movie's great visual trick, which is a de-aging process that allows its leads to play their characters across something like 5 or 6 decades. In short, yes, it is distracting up until about halfway through the film, after which it really is not. The much more interesting conversation is to be had around how the movie chronicles the demise of withered old men whose power and glory fades into the shadows of old age and death, along with the secrets they may or may not have kept and the lives they most certainly saw fit to take. To be clear, this is not Scorsese's typical gangster movie, and if anyone who lambasted Casino as a remake of Goodfellas had the same concerns here, they will surely be in no doubt now. Where the director's previous movies have at times sailed very close to the wind in their glorification of the men at their centres, The Irishman most certainly cannot be accused of similar. This is a film that is happy to take its time in very slowly and methodically ensuring that you are in no doubt as to whether there is anything heroic or enviable about the actions of Sheeran or Buffalino, and if the account of Hoffa's demise is anything close to the truth, Frank Sheeran may actually be one of the least sympathetic men in history. De Niro is fantastic in a wonderfully measured performance, though I fear the CG makeup, or make-down, does somewhat dull the work he does with his eyes, and this is a film with a lot of storytelling that takes place purely in people's eyes. Pacino was probably born to play Hoffa, though at this point in his career we've seen so many variations of this performance from him that it perhaps feels less fresh and energetic than might have been hoped. He's still brilliant though, because he's Pacino, and Pacino probably can't live minute to minute without being brilliant. It's Pesci though, I keep saying Pesci though, who has been earning the most plaudits for his portrayal of Buffalino, and I tend to agree. With a reputation as the nice guy among mafia bosses, if there can be such a thing, this performance isn't Tommy, nor is it Nicky, and rather something completely new and engaging from the actor, which makes me really glad Scorsese talked him into one last job. While critics have pretty much anointed The Irishman as Scorsese's greatest, most mature work to date, and I probably need a couple more viewings myself before I feel comfortable echoing that, there has been criticism from other quarters, mainly in the film's lack of involvement from its female cast, which is A, completely disingenuous, and B, entirely missing the point in what the inclusion of those roles is saying about Frank and his philosophy, or lack thereof. There's an incredibly telling moment later in the film where a frail and fading Sheeran attempts to assuage the anguish of one of his daughters and telling her that his actions have always been about protecting his family. The response, a curt "from what?" perfectly frames the preceding 3 hours of narrative and amorality into 2 syllables flat. I really, really like The Irishman, and even if I wasn't able to view it optimally, I did, over 2 nights, find a pretty natural point of intermission, and I don't feel it lessened my experience at all. Remember, kids, if anyone wants to tell you how you ought to consume your art, you can roundly tell them to F off. This is contemplative, meditative cinema of an incredibly high degree, and as a swan song to the combined talents of an iconic trio of actors, it's a wonderful gift. I dare say it's not for everyone, but then neither is anything else. Discuss.
I really enjoyed this.
Yeah.
Did you watch it in accordance with Scorsese's wishes, which I believe I interpreted correctly was at 3 times speed on an Apple Watch? I think that's what it was, right?
I think he said you had to watch it on a mobile phone with a 40-foot diagonal screen.
Just in case also people think that I don't like long films. I don't like unnecessarily long films.
I've never thought of you as having a problem with long films.
We do complain about it a lot, but that's because a lot of films
are too long unnecessarily. Yes.
No, I just assume that if a film's is of the relevant length, you don't have a problem with it.
Yes, I don't.
Exactly.
And one person who regularly makes very long films I will happily watch again and again is Martin Scorsese. I watched this in one sitting, and it flew along, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't think it was spectacular, though. I still think Goodfellas is a number of degrees above this, but I've only seen this once. I've seen Goodfellas a dozen times, so let's see how that pans out. It's just really great. The CGI de-aging. I'd read various people complaining about it, and I was expecting a Grand Moff Tarkin moment from Star Wars.
And it's not that at all.
It's not even close. It didn't even take me, what did you say, Craig, about an hour and a half into it that you stopped noticing?
About halfway through, yeah.
It was actually less than that for me. It was more because it wasn't that it was distracted, it's more that it was inconsistent. Most of the time, it's actually pretty good, apart from some weird things going on with the lights in Bobby De Niro's eyes.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because when I was talking about the acting that happens with eyes, I was really distracting because I almost felt like too much attention. It was as if they were over-enhancing the eyes.
Yeah.
Like there was too much catch light. There was too much kind of moisture in the eye in an attempt to sort of sell you the trick.
Yeah, it didn't look like his eyes. It looked like, they'd fiddled with his eyys, and it was really too bad. But so for the most part, it actually looks pretty good. Perhaps the only really dodgy thing was when they increased their age slightly in a few scenes, in which case it looked more like just bad makeup, and actually that was the worst part. But it's slightly inconsistent. There's a few scenes where it looked more like they were wearing, like they'd painted their own face on their face, or wearing some kind of wax mask or something. But those are few and far between, actually, so that kind of, apart from the eye thing, passed me by quite quickly. I think it's Joe Pesci that's quite rightly, as you say, Craig, is getting all the plaudits. I could have watched like a film that was just him. In quality, because I thought it was fantastic. And I'd liked Joe Pesci a lot. He's particularly with his work with Scorsese in the past, but you know that he's just been in a lot of crap as well, and he's not very good in it. It's like, maybe just he needs the right director, because he clearly has the chops. And
it's very rare you've seen Pesci with like a volume dial that could be adjusted. And this is one of the few times of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I just thought he was great. It's nice to see Al Pacino, doing something really good again, not being talking about Dunkachino or being in Righteous Kill or 88 Minutes or anything. He's done some right stinkers as well. Yeah, it's a master filmmaker with actors who are masters of their craft. Very entertaining. I think the only problem that I had with this, I think, is the character, because he's so amoral, and as you say, Craig, especially one of like the least likeable characters you can possibly imagine, one of the worst people ever.
Yeah.
For instance, when you see like Goodfellas, you've got Henry Hill, and his character is like, you can get on board with this character because you understand from the young boy the desire that gets in a bit too deep. You
can understand his revelling in the lifestyle.
Yeah.
But for Sheeran, there isn't even that lifestyle.
No, it's like the deed he does towards the end, if it's anything close to the truth, as you say, it's like he didn't even question it. He didn't put one word of argument. He just did it.
No, there was a great deal beforehand, and it was the point at which I think there was a real turning point in the movie, and I really found the last hour of it, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but I found the last hour of this film like really oddly moving. I think it might just be looking at these older men and thinking about what's in store, and thinking about people we know ourselves, and that thing of these men and the power that they've held, and to see them actually so frail. But at the point it really started at the point at which it became obvious what De Niro was going to have to do in relation to, Sheeran was going to have to do in relation to Hoffa, and you could see. Prior to it, Drew, you could see the reluctance and the hesitation. Like you said, he didn't really express any opposition. I mean, I think he tried to willfully obfuscate the conversation at best. And you could see him searching for an answer other than the obvious, but he didn't put up any resistance, and he carried out his order anyway. And what surprised me, and I think which is the most telling thing about the character, and the point at which you realise that the character, there was no redemption to be had for Shank Shank as I know him, as I used to call him, Frank Sheeran, is that he's offered an opportunity to express regret for his actions in relation to Jimmy Hoffa at a certain point with another character, and he makes it quite clear to them that he doesn't have any. And it's not the answer that I was expecting. and you think, oh my God, right,
Yeah,
okay, this guy is utterly irredeemable.
Yeah, I'm pleased it wasn't, though, because it would have been so false and so hollow. But it's just, it's not how these stories typically go.
Yeah, I think it's the point at which you realise that this is just for once something brutally honest and frank. And I kind of appreciated that honesty. It's not necessarily what you want in your heart, but it is what you understand in your head. And it was just, it felt like something new to see that. But it was like just oddly emotional the last hour of this film, and that scene where the act is carried out and handled, I found really disconcerting and haunting in its matter of factness. And in fact, it's not a particularly violent movie in relation to some of the other stuff that Scorsese has done, but it's almost more affecting because everything is handled in such a matter-of-fact way. But that one scene in particular where we see what happens with Hoffa, I was really unsettled by it, and I really expected... I was kind of feeling sorry for Frank in the moment, because I felt like you could see the struggle he was having internally, even if he wasn't externalizing it. And then to have that answer, which was absolutely not what you expected, like, kind of knocked me sideways. And it's not a film with moments that you expect to knock you sideways, because it's hugely understated. There's none of the flash, there's none of the glamour, there's none of even the technical showboating that you expect at certain points from Scorsese. There's none of the freeze frames, there's none of the crash zoom, there's none of the like super long single takes, there's none of that stuff. It's just really matter of fact in handling all that stuff, and it had a really weird effect on me in the last hour.
I think it might be one sort of bit of somewhat technical showboating, which I assume is a direct callback to the long tracking shot in Goodfellas, because it's right at the start when it's tracking through the nursing home and getting to the rather, by that point, already quite defeated looking Frank, and it sort of encapsulates quite well how it's almost the exact inverse of Goodfellas. How it's absolutely not going to be about any kind of glamour. It's about the almost more matter-of-fact, business-like nature of it, which is, I think you said, it doesn't make for a film that's going to blow you away the way that Goodfellas does. It's not going to have the kind of razzle-dazzle elements of it, but
it's not going to seduce you.
Yeah, it's probably stronger for not having it, and it's it is clearly a very, very good film. It may be his best. It's going to be hard to say without giving it a bit more fullness of time. But yes, it's
it needs multiple viewings, I think.
Absolutely, but yeah, it's you can see why people are calling it his most mature and his perhaps most reflective work. It does, particularly given the kind of career he's had and the kind of films he's made. This feels like something of a better meditation on the actual characters of these people. And their morality of it, and where it's got them in the end, and it's passing more of a judgment on that than it did in the likes of Goodfellas or Casino. And it's certainly a much more interesting film for that in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's also there are obvious comparisons to Goodfellas, and so in the early stages I thought it felt very like it, the same way the music crosses between shots, the Thelma Schoonmaker's editing and stuff. But it's actually telling a very different story, and so you can't really compare them, because Goodfellas is about, as we mentioned, like the glamour, and you're seeing why this person would be attracted to it, and then they end up having to do these things because they're in that life, whereas this person is a terrible, terrible person who got brought into this life because he happened to have particular skills that was useful, rather than he wasn't seeking it out. And so it's actually a very different look, similar world, similar time, obviously. It's actually a very different character study.
Well, even the setups for it. Henry Hill, as long as I can remember, wanted to be a gangster. And Frank is like, well, one time a gangster helped me fix my car. And I thought I'd start being a gangster at that point.
And I'd got quite used to dispassionately offing enemy soldiers who were prisoners of war during the war without questioning my orders for it. And so I thought I would do the same for him.
Yes.
It is much more mature than something like Goodfellas, and though I know it's going to come down to one of those things where I think I can imagine in the long term appreciating that The Irishman is probably the better film technically, but Goodfellas might be the more enjoyable film.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But Goodfellas does openly try to seduce you as a viewer into that lifestyle, to try and make you complicit in it, which is where the sort of where the sort of gut punch, or as close to a gut punch ending as you get in Goodfellas, comes from. I suppose Goodfellas makes you feel a bit dirty for sort of indulging in that lifestyle and sort of and feeling that way about the glamorization of it to begin with. There's none of that here whatsoever. This film makes it clear from the start. Like I said, I'd forgotten about that shot at the start, Scott, but it's kind of like, you remember this shot from the other film where all this stuff was portrayed quite
yes, this is a different film, yes,
portrayed alluringly. Well, look, here I'm using that same technical prowess to show you an old man whose family don't want anything to do with him anymore and who has nothing left in the world because he chose to throw it all away for no reason whatsoever.
But seems fine with it.
yeah, has bizarrely made his peace with it.
Which I guess makes you think that he never actually cared much about the other stuff anyway. But just to talk about whether this is better than Goodfellas and what is best, not. Can we not have that conversation? Because I don't feel like I need to.
It's not necessary.
I have time to watch more than one, and I love a lot of Scorsese's work, so I'll happily watch them both again. So.
I was really worried this was basically going to come across as a tech demo, and so the fact that not only was it not that, but essentially, that became irrelevant at a certain point in the film, that it turned out to be quite so good as it is at this point in Scorsese's career, for him to pull something like this out of the bag and for everyone involved to not be dialing in their righteous kill performances.
Pacino and a great point to give a Scarface.
Yeah, this along with like Blade Runner 2049, this I've been waiting for so long, and I was counting the days till this came on Netflix, and I was like super pissed that I didn't have the opportunity. I knew I wasn't going to get the opportunity to see it in a cinema, and I was literally counting down, and then I couldn't watch it the first 2 days that it was on Netflix, and then I had to watch it over 2 nights, and I really don't care because I enjoyed my time with it immensely, and I'm looking forward to repeat viewings and a better assessment of it. But even the stuff that I think didn't work about the de-aging, and other people have discussed it at enough length, and I've got nothing new to say about it. You haven't heard on 100 other podcasts anyway about the frailty of their posture and the physical movement, and they can de-age what's there now, but they can't recreate the face that was there then. So a de-aged Robert De Niro now, looks nothing like Robert De Niro of Taxi Driver, for example. It's kind of irrelevant. It's just a really, really fantastic contemplative piece of art, and it's not the most uplifting subject ever, but assuming that you that's not a barrier to you, I'm really can't recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, and Scorsese's doing what you're really meant to do with tools like that. He's using those tools to help him tell the story.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to do with Coppola had to do with The Godfather and have a different actor playing the younger person. You have a consistency of portrayal, consistency of character. Beyond just the physical thing, you actually have the consistency of the actor doing it. So he's using it as a tool to help him tell the story better.
The only discussion I've had with myself was that at first I came away from it, and the first thought I had was, that was really great. I kind of was a bit distracted by the technical aspects earlier on, but I soon sort of forgot about it, which was, I think, is an indicator of the fact that, like you say, Drew, it's been used for storytelling purposes, and it's a really engaging story. So you stop caring about it, even if there are sort of distractions here and there. The only conversation I've had with myself is I came away from it and I thought to myself, I would really prefer if it had been made 30 years ago, though, where really talented makeup artists could have made them up 30 years down and also 30 years up. Maybe not 30, it wouldn't have been 30 years down then, but it could have made them down 20 years at the time and 30 years up or whatever, or whatever necessary. But I also think to myself that these are performances as skilled as De Niro and Pacino and Pesce are. I feel like these are performances that can probably only be given by people of a certain age with that kind of experience, if that makes sense. So I know that other people have made that point about, could you not have used other actors, or could you not have, made down people? There have been plenty of examples where that has worked in other films, and I might argue one way or the other with that, to be honest, depending on the film. But I am actually kind of the opinion that probably this could only be made effectively now and with that kind of approach. So, yeah, sold. Sold.
I don't know. For the most part, I would tend to agree with you, Craig, about acting is one of those things you tend to get better at with age. whether you're bringing life experience or not. But it's not always the case, and I think perhaps, well, maybe until this film actually, De Niro might be one of those people I thought wasn't one of those ones. He burns so brightly between sort of like mid-70s to mid-90s, then just seemed to, I don't know, stop caring. And the only time you ever got glimpses of like the actor that you knew could be there was perhaps unexpectedly. Maybe it sounds a silly example, but I was really entertained by Robert De Niro in Stardust when he was playing the gay pirate, and I was like, oh wait, that guy can act, because the last thing I saw him was like Hide and Seek or Godsend or something like that, you know. It's, and so yeah, De Niro had gone in for some terrible stuff, and then I'm thinking, yeah, and Pacino's in that. Was it Jack and Jill who did that Dunkachino thing? And I think, yeah, what's going on? Oh no, they just needed to have the right project and the right director, and it's fantastic. So actually, both Pacino and De Niro, I would argue, could possibly have done this 30 years ago, as you suggest. But I don't think it would necessarily been better. Maybe not worse, but I don't think it could have been better.
The other great thing about this film, Drew, is that I've been completely unable since watching it to think about Joe Pesci's character without also thinking to myself, Mr. Buffalino, Mr. Ross Buffalino. I was hoping you'd appreciate that. Oh dear. There you go.